Last week going in, the word was just happened to need it. I like that.
Second Friday. If you notice, all the Fridays happen on the same day. Just pretend. I pretend like I do miss you. Time isn't real anyways. Let's be real. Okay, so we were talking about Lawrence Rabb because this is who my poet obsession is going to be for the next 4 weeks, and so I'm just kind of basing all of my prompts on him because he's who I'm going to focus on for the next couple of weeks. So the first poem I have by Lawrence Rabb for you is a poem called Riddle. It's from his book collection called The Collector of Cold Weather. And so here is the poem Riddle. That moon, for example, shaving from a nail, palest of openings, and those stars, they're fading now, but they were always fading. From evening, I take what I need to get through the days of morning and afternoon. Water for the sake of company, fire on the hill. Each night I show you this white cone of ash. Each night I tell you, but I keep nothing for myself. Hedge and field, curve of the road, table and book, coffin in the ground. Whatever settles into the earth comes back to the light in time. Again, I tell you this, and you believe it. And you take what you need, and you believe it is yours. Ooh. I like that poem. I think that poem is the poem that sort of led me to commit the time to sort of figure this poet out. So for right now, let's just stay with that poem. And even beyond that poem, because there's a lot to unpack in the poem, let's just like look at one stanza. Because honestly, on a Friday night, one stanza is about as far as we can go. That's how much time it takes. So think of each stanza in a book. Well, think of, I don't know how to put that. So in a collection of poems, in one poem, in one stanza, that one stanza is probably the length of a Friday night, right? So take your poems one Friday night at a time. I almost said something cheesy, like your lovers, right? Or something like that. But I mean it. Take each small moment and cherish it. And in this case, we're going to look at the first stanza of the poem Riddle. So the first stanza goes like this. That moon, comma, for example, M dash, shaving from a nail, comma, palest of openings, period. And those stars, M dash, they're fading now, but they were always fading, period. So what I want us to look at for our second Friday is how punctuation is poetry. So my favorite piece of punctuation is the M dash, EM dash, but it's referred to as the M dash because the dash itself is the length of a typed letter M. And if you were to look up the definition of the M dash, it's basically punctuation that replaces the colon, the comma, the parentheticals, right? So it's almost like the punctuation you use if you don't know what punctuation to use, but that's not what the M dash is, because the poets actually took possession of the M dash. Like usually if you're gonna see an M dash, it's gonna be in a poem. And I think we have Emily Dickinson to thank for that. And if we're gonna look at the M dash as Emily Dickinson looks at the M dash, is the M dash is almost like in math, how you have an equal sign like this equals that. In poetry, the M dash is this approximates this. So in poetry, there are no answers. There's no real landing place. That's why it's so full of possibility, is because we can't actually, we're dealing with mystery, right? You can't solve a mystery and still have mystery, right? So poetry lives within the world of mystery, which can be very comforting. It might seem upsetting to not be able to find the answers in life, but there's other things where not having an answer is much more comforting, like what happens after we die. It's much more comforting to think of that as a mystery than an answer. At least I find it that way. And that's why I love poetry and the punctuation of poetry and how punctuation is poetry in poetry, right? So the M dash equals something, but not the same way that an answer is to a question. It's the proximity. And proximity, the definition of that is nearness or closeness. So rather than looking for a definition, I believe that poetry is in search for a closeness. And I mean that emotionally, right? Like, how are we to know how another person loves? But if we spend enough time with that person, we develop a closeness. And even if we don't understand each other completely, we still care about each other. And that, I think, is what poetry does. And it does that through the art of proximity. And proximity can be declared through the M dash, right? So blank equals blank, or at least this is the closest I can bring you to this place, this thing, this time, this life, this love, right? So this place, M dash, fill in the blank. What is this place? This thing, M dash, fill in the blank. What is this thing? You know, like this life, M dash. If I were to define this one life, the closest I could come to is a broken bird learning to fly again. It's not going to be the same for everyone, right? Where it's not an answer, it's a proximity to the larger things of life. All right, so Lawrence Rabb does that again and again. I love it. So that moon, comma, for example, M dash, shaving from a nail, comma, palest of openings. So the moon, in this case, the moon is the approximate of it is a nail, like a person's cut nail, right? And it's the palest of openings, right? But what I love about this is moon, M dash, it approximates the human nail. And what this sort of implies for us is that we as human beings are the moon. We are the opening to the sky. He does it again, right? And those stars, M dash, they're fading now, but they were always fading. So stars, M dash, meaning approximates man. And we as humans are fading. So, and how we can get that is in these lines, and those stars, they're fading now, but they were always fading. It has echoes of the famous quote by Shakespeare. So in his play The Tempest, Prospero famously says, "We are such stuff as dreams are made on." So Shakespeare says that human beings are made of the stuff of stars. And here we have Lawrence Rabb sort of echoing that, saying, we too are stars fading, right? And what's so fun about this, again, because we're approximating. So when you approximate, you're saying things without saying them. You're implying them. And I love that. So proximity here is saying without saying that all in life is small. So the moon, when you put it in perspective of the universe, is small. We, when we put it in comparison to the moon, are small. The parts of us, even smaller, right? So all in the universe is small, depending on, scope and scale. And then, of course, all, including the stars, are dying. That fading implies dying, right? And so here we have, with all this proximity, this urgency, this tension, this mysticism even, right? And I think that that is only possible through the use of the M dash. So your assignment for this Friday is to go out, read poems, find poems with M dashes. I definitely recommend Emily Dickinson. She's the dash queen, right? And then once you kind of get a feel for how the M dash creates proximity, how it makes two things define each other without giving an answer or a definition, but how two things, I guess, approximate each other. Once you get kind of a good feel of how that works in poetry, try it on your own. Write a poem that's full of em dashes. This approximates this. This approximates this. The more surprising, the better, right? So to say that the moon is a cut fingernail surprises me and delights me. And so that is your goal for this Friday. Yay! I forget to breathe.
Bye guys, thank you. Have a great night.